digital collaboration.
Session for today. Again, I'd like to welcome as well all the guests coming from the industry, the education. So since last year, the 196 organizations and leaders, right, they made the jumps from 1 to 2, right, or even 3. Can you imagine the number of people are going through mental health issues? So that's how will we do this? So we researched, that there are certain things that have already been implemented like this as a way to inform as well other leaders in the other agencies. I love this, coming from the Department of Trade and Industry. They're saying that when the nation develops its people, the people will develop. So thank you for today. God bless you. Thank you so much.
And we're happy that for the second quarter of 2021, we were able to among our workers to go out, especially those who have not been vaccinated yet. Overseas po, alam naman po natin na the pandemic has an impact. We speak about 2 million na rin po yung atin pong na-release.
So these are the things that we would like to invite everyone, if these are very important to you.
Welcome to the Career Assistance Program. It's Tuesday night, 8 to 9 p.m. when we air our Career Assistance Program, the program that will assist students, graduates, and even employees in the workplace environment as guidance to improve and advance your careers. So for tonight's feature, we will be having our virtual internship, the learnings and trainings that are needed to join the digital workplace environment. So stay tuned for our segment on virtual internship, the next normal. So now let's begin our first segment here on Career Assistance Program. So we'll be discussing about virtual internships, training for the digital workplace environment. So what is this new normal or next normal that will take place in order to really affect and influence our internship program? So what is really the objective of internships, on-the-job training, or practicum for our students? And this cut across to all of the disciplines or fields of studies. So what we really aim for is to provide an immersive experiential learning to the student in an actual workplace environment to see the application of concepts studied in school. So what we really want to happen is that the students will gain insight through the actual experience that they will be immersed in when they see what is happening in the workplace environment, and then they can recall what theories and concepts they have learned in school and relate those insights and experiences to those concepts and theories. What are the requirements of the internships, on-the-job training, or practicum according to the Circular Memorandum Order issued by the Commission on Higher Education? So first and foremost, we maintain close contact with the workplace supervisor or mentor. So this has always been the requirement, even when we still had our face-to-face internships. The second is the student must really provide a training report with an emphasis on problem solving and, of course, the supervisor's evaluation on the basis of their performance during the internship. Lastly, now that we have no face to face contact in general with our supervisor or even the mentor in the enterprise, we may have a practicum seminar or webinar, and the student is required to participate in said seminar. What are the modalities of learning that are allowed under this new normal of virtual internships? First is we can continue to have on-site activities. However, even if we are required to have our physical presence in the enterprise, they're only allowed under the IATF guidelines. So this will probably include by appointment only, limited number of participants, physical distancing, health protocols, and other guidelines that we have to maintain where we are within the closed environment of the enterprise. Second, we can have online activities. They can comprise academic and co-curricular activities and work-related learnings. And they can actually be undertaken online, meaning they are going to be streaming or virtually, either a recorded version, and they could be either synchronous or asynchronous. The third type of modality will be through modules or modular method. This refers to printed, digitalized, or electronic copies of the materials or documents used during the practicum activities. What are the flexible practicum modalities that we are now advancing when we are conducting our virtual internships? First is it still covers our academic endeavors and industry capstone program, which includes academic coursework, desk analysis, and industry capstone programs. So some of these examples would be, for example, descriptive industry paper. An example would be for the consumer goods industry. What would be a capstone program about the industry? Let us say we are conducting a market research about the consumer goods industry, a development plan in order to recover from the pandemic to increase the sales of said consumer goods. What would be a strategic business plan for a particular enterprise to be undertaken? Maybe the enterprise where you're conducting your internship. A feasibility study of introducing a new product in the market, plus a business entrepreneurial plan, for example, for online sellers. So these are some of the possible academic coursework and industry capstone programs that can be undertaken. The second type will be, of course, to conduct a research. So what will be the inclusions in a research output that we may undertake for our virtual internship, on-the-job training, or practicum? Of course, you begin with the research topic. And in our example, we can talk about the consumer goods industry. What will be a research problem? For instance, they experienced a decline in the sales due to the pandemic. So a problem could be that they would need to increase to recover the previous market sales of consumer goods. So you will have to, of course, write the introduction, which comprises the background of the study. So what is the consumer goods industry all about? What will be the significance because our economy will have to recover from the decline in sales brought about by the COVID pandemic? And what will be the scope and limitations? For example, we only limit the product that we are researching on, for example, as methyl alcohol, one of the healthcare products that was very necessary during the pandemic. What will be the review of related literature? Did we have specific studies that already conducted this kind of topic or research problem? Definition of terms. What are consumer goods, for example? To continue on, of course, you have your theoretical and conceptual framework. So you will frame it within the framework of what marketing management is and what will be the consumer or retail trade within marketing management. You have the statement of the problem. As I said, there was a decline in the sale brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic. So the problem will be how to revitalize interest in the consumer product. What will be your research design and framework? So do we do interview? Do we conduct a survey? Or do we have a focus group discussion, for example? Sampling method and participants identification will definitely look into who will be participating in our research. After all the data has been gathered, we have to conduct our analysis. And finally, we have our conclusion as well as our recommendations of what course of action to undertake for the enterprise in order to recover its decline in sales. There can also be work from home arrangements or what we may call remote practicum, and this is in conjunction with arrangements or agreements with different enterprises. So first is you could have a commission work from home arrangement. So for example, the company or enterprise will commission the on-the-job trainees in order to conduct a market research. Then what will happen is that they will have to turn on off the output of market research into their commission work. Second will be home-based entrepreneurial or business activities. As I've mentioned, one of the great innovators during the pandemic was the presence of online sellers. So this could be a home-based entrepreneurial or business activity that can merit a study to be conducted by the practicum participants. Of course, you can have e-modular and virtual assistance program. As I mentioned, these are printed, digitalized, or electronic copies of what the modules comprise of, and then they could be assisted by the mentors or the enterprise personnel in understanding what it entails for marketing activities to be conducted in the consumer goods industry. The components required, of course, will be one, you would need a point person for the school and the enterprise. Usually, this is your advisor from the school, as well as the mentor or the personnel assigned by the company to supervise the practicum participants. Of course, you have your assignments and outputs. So are these commission work? Are these computations? Is it a market research as an output? These are your assignments and outputs that will have to be turned in periodically or in a timely manner as required by both the school and the enterprise. You have the duration of the remote practice. Now, this is very important because depending on the academic program that you are currently studying, you must be in compliance with the required number of hours as indicated by the on-the-job training requirements in the specific academic program and circular memorandum ordered issued by the Commission on Higher Education. Then, of course, you have submission of final output. As mentioned in the earlier examples, they could be the commission work, the market research, the interviews, or the surveys. Periodic monitoring report is usually a requirement of the school focal person. It could be a requirement of the enterprise supervisor, or it could be a requirement for both, as well as for the overall monitoring report to be submitted to the school for all of the participants in the on-the-job training in a particular enterprise. And of course, lastly, as a basis for the assessment of the student's performance, there is a need for the evaluation by the higher education institution as well as the enterprise representative of the student's performance in the enterprise all throughout the duration of the on-the-job training, internship, or practical. Well, with this introduction, we will be featuring many of these enterprises who are going to be involved very soon in the virtual internships, on-the-job training, and practicum, and hope that you will tune in so that you will know precisely what it is that you may undertake. So the education channel will be partnering with this different business enterprises in order to bring to you the best for the virtual internships, on-the-job training, or practicum requirement for our students, especially our seniors who are graduating, or they could also be newly graduates or even employees already in the workplace environment who might be interested to shift careers. So we'll be right back.
Thank you also for the words from Ryan. Although I must contest that I actually today as well. Thank you.
Present these presentations to you today and kind of start the conversation around what flood resilience and flood mitigation might look like at a broader level here in Tennessee. And so now I'm going to kick it over to Dwayne Land, the former mayor of Dunlap, Tennessee, and the president of Tree DC. And he is going to introduce our presenters and get us started.
Thank you, Logan.
Recording in progress.
Thank you, Logan, and I really appreciate Cooley and you and everybody being here today, and thank you for this opportunity. I became mayor of Dunlap in 2009 through 2000 until 2021, and Tree DC was formed in 2008 by UTC and 4 mayors at that time. And of course, I didn't come on board until 2009. I seen what they were doing and felt it was a good thing to get involved with. I did in 2000 and 11 or 12, somewhere through there. They put me on the board of directors. And then in 2015, I became president of Tree DC. During these years, we did several projects of clean energy, and we've, been involved in many of those. Also, we'd like to say that we're very excited about Tennessee Flood Ready, because here in Dunlap, we're in a bowl right here in the Sequatchie Valley. And for 12 years, I worked on the flood as much as I could, because the costly amount. But we really did some good downtown on our strip mall center. It was flooding every time it rained 4 or 5 inches. It would flood, and people were putting sandbags and such. So we got most of that done after we did the redoing of what we could. It has not flooded since, and we had about 7 or 8 inches the other day. And Mayor Huth, the current mayor, we're working closely together. And I know, as you know, Logan, he was one of the first to join in with us, so he's very excited about that. And I know he will be, because his phone's going to ring off the wall like mine did, and it does it in the middle of the night when you're evacuating people out with the rescue squad, the fire department, and city employees. Were getting people out of their homes. That's really went down, but we still have a problem, as I know many throughout Tennessee does. And there's no way that any city that I know of that has a flooding problem can just afford to take care of it on their own. If they do, I'd like to know how. But, Tree DC, from Dr. Joe Johnson, a heavy supporter that was president of UT, he came to Dunlap a couple of times to my office, and it just meant a lot to me. And he's in a nursing home now, but he's been still a big, huge supporter of Tree DC and continues to do so. And that means a lot to us. But where we think that Tree DC can help is with the mayors being involved, because we have 108 mayors throughout the state that are members of Tree DC. And we feel that with them being the backbone and pushing, that it would help. It just to give a louder voice, for legislation to listen to. So with all that, we just hope that we can develop flood mitigation techniques throughout. And that's going to be our goal, is to help do that. It's serious. It's a threat to economic development and security here in Tennessee, especially in our most vulnerable communities. Tree DC wants to work with Flood Ready Tennessee and our state officials. Mainly, we got to get them involved. We got to get them behind it, and we want to find solutions that will support our counties and our cities and our towns. So, as we do that, I think we're off to a good start. I know we've had several mayors that signed up really quick, and there'll be lots more to enter. And I think that it'll be good. So I guess at this time, Logan, I'll turn it over to you, and then we'll do questions at the end, of course. But thank you again for having us. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mayor Land. Appreciate the introduction and Tree DC's partnership with Flood Ready Tennessee. I know you and your members are extremely excited about it, and we are too. So now I'm going to kind of lead a conversation between myself and Mayor J.J. Reels from Monterey, Tennessee, up in Putnam County, and just kind of hear about what they've been dealing with over the last few years as it relates to some local flooding, and how they've had to be creative in finding solutions, and maybe some opportunities where they could grow. And so, Mayor Reels, I'll turn it over to you. Could you kind of just introduce yourself and talk a little bit about Monterey for those who haven't had the pleasure of visiting y'all up there in Putnam County?
Thanks, Logan, and thanks, Mary Land, for those introductions and what you're all trying to do. Like Logan said, I'm Mayor J.J. Reels. I'm from Monterey, born and raised. Joined the Navy right out of high school, spent 21 years, retired back home in 2014, just wanted to be retired, but public service pulled me back in. I wasn't elected in 2017, but I filled an empty seat on the city board. In 2018, I put some legislation, I guess you could say, an ordinance through to address our flooding situation. It's been going on for 60 years at that point. Every time it would rain, our park would flood. So I put in a 3-part solution, and a lot of it could be done with our city workers. But what ended up happening was it was just too big of a job, and there was too many regulations, too much red tape that we had to deal with, and trying to get any solution done. We've scrimped and scrounged, and Rob Peter paid Paul, as the saying goes, to be able to do the first 2 parts of it, and the third part is the most daunting one because they call it a blue line stream. Basically, it's a ditch line, but it's got water in it all the time. So doing with T-deck, it's just a nightmare if I'm being honest. But we're trying to go through some of the ARP money because it now involves floodwater mitigation. So we're working with the county to try to find some money through them to be able to do a overall in the entire city flood prevention, if you will. Like you said, Monterey is up in Putnam County. We're on the Cumberland Plateau, about 1,900 feet elevation. People think, well, you're on a plateau. Well, Monterey is pretty flat, and from the point where it starts by the high school to where it goes over to I-40, it's less than 1% grade. So that water don't travel very fast. It's got a slow process, but we got to find a way to be able to funnel it to a way to get it out of the way. Just a beautiful place up here, and it's a shame that we've been fighting this for so long. And even though we've done these 2 things to address the flooding so far, a couple of weeks ago it rained 7 inches, and we had water, higher than I've seen it before. But luckily, it's not like it used to be where it would stay for days. Now it takes a few hours and it drains off. But that last part is what is, kind of the holdup, if you will, because there's so much that's involved. And if you release water here, it's going to create, more problems downstream. And that's what we're facing now. It's now starting to wash out, some of the yards and stuff because there's so much water going through. And it's like a choke point. It can't go through all this vegetation. So we're just trying to find a solution to fix that problem.
So Mary Rose, it sounds like you said, it's been a problem for quite some time. Other than kind of regulations, what other barriers have you encountered in terms of the city itself trying to address these problems? I mean, is it something with technical assistance in terms of being able to find ways to design projects that are going to alleviate that flooding, or is it financial resources being able to actually fund and execute those projects? What are some of those barriers that you see as the city trying to help solve some of the problems that are affecting the businesses and the homeowners there?
It's just the financials. It's so costly to do these projects. Like I said, we scrimped and scrounged, and the first 2 parts is over $250,000. We actually went out and got a capital outlay note to be able to fund part of it, and we used some of the money that the governor gave to us to fund the second part. So here we are, we're being creative to try to find a solution, but the last part is the big part, and I'm working with the engineer now to, like I said, come up with an overall solution. He's going through all the grades of the entire city to find out where do we need to put in, XYZ to get the water, to where it needs to go and alleviate the flooding. It's just, like I said, it's just a lot of red tape and the financials, like I said, is the biggest part. I've had Cameron Sexton, Speaker of the House, in my office. We've sat and talked about it. Senator Paul Bailey is our, for our region, and we've sat and talked about it. Congressman John Rose, who represents us in Washington D.C., we've talked about it, and it's always comes down to the money.
Yeah,
that's always going to be the holdup.
Right. So it sounds like you've engaged a lot of the stakeholders at the state and the federal level that could help alleviate some of this. Have you had any conversations, about regional solutions? You said what you do here is going to affect the water, and downstream where it goes, or what happens upstream is going to affect you all. Has there been sort of collaboration there? And if not, is that something that you think would be helpful?
Mayor Porter is our county mayor, and he's also on part of the Flood Rate Tennessee. And we've talked about it a little bit. And one of the things that, like I said, we're kind of up on a mountain. Everybody says we go to Monterey, you go up the mountain to get to Monterey for Cookeville.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, it's flat up here. And once the water gets directed over underneath I-40 to where it goes into we call it a lake, but it's not really a lake. It's just a small reservoir. Then it goes down the mountain into Caffkiller River. So there's really no, issue with it going over the mountain. But I know Mayor Porter, there's some places in the county that gets flooded quite a bit. And it takes a big rainstorm to really flood up here. Fortunately, we're blessed that we're not like Waverly that had that huge flooding down there. But it is dangerous. There was a while back an elderly gentleman driving, and he drove right in the middle of it. And next thing you know, he's got water up to his windows. Fortunately, our police got him out pretty quick. Not too long ago, there was quite a storm, and it was outside the city limits, but it washed a creek bed culvert out, and the guy coming down the road didn't see it. His truck went over in it and knocked him out, and he drowned. So, like I said, that's not in the city, but that is the kind of things that I think about when, we were getting ready, and I heard rain. I looked at the window. I'm like, oh man, here we go again. But then I got on my phone, looked at the radar, and it's just a little bit. I'm like, all right, thank you, Lord. Every time it rains, it really makes me anxious because of everything that's happened for, like I said, it's been going on 60 years.
Mm-hmm. So it also sounds like you've been able to put to use some of these American Rescue Plan dollars that have been allocated from the governor and from the state. Do you think if in the future, if there were similar resources available, like the ARP dollars, but maybe they're state allocated, are there more projects that you see being done in the future that could make move the needle a little bit on these flooding issues?
Absolutely. If there was a pot of money that was available that we could start the project at least, because now it costs a lot to even get these projects started, because you have all your engineering fees, who has subcontractors after subcontractors, try just to get a plan together. It's several tens of thousands of dollars just to get to that point. If we even had a pot of money to get to that point, know what we're going to have to do to fix the problem, then that would be a huge step in the right direction. But now there's really nothing available. And you had mentioned that I think it was yesterday you called me and said that we're going to have a meeting next week with some folks in Nashville, and I think I mentioned to you at the GovCon conference for economic development, I spoke to the TDEC director down there, and what I was talking about was ARP dollars, because all they're saying is water, sewer, water, sewer, water, sewer. And I explained there's not going to be enough contractors and not enough, engineering firms to do everything for every city and every county. And I think that's maybe partly where the stormwater mitigation part came into it. And because before it was just, like I said, sewer, water, that was it. And I told them we're going to have to get creative to find out how to use this money, because there's not going to be enough people to do the work for these, basic infrastructure projects you're talking about. We're going to have to find other solutions to use the money. So hopefully, that had a little bearing. I don't know if it did, but I like to speak my mind. I think you know me well enough, Logan, that I'm going to say what's on my mind. I'm retired Navy. I carry a coffee cup with me all the time. I'm one of them old crusty guys, they say. But like I said, it's a blessing to be involved in this, and I appreciate you putting the opportunity for me to do this out there. I look forward to working with everybody.
Yeah, and I think what you mentioned there at the end, just being able to really look for ways to work together, to find these solutions, to get the technical expertise, to get the engineers, and to think creatively about how to use the money that's available, and also to hopefully find some new resources in the future. I know you mentioned Waverly, but some other small towns like Dyersburg have been really creative in the way they've used some existing funds to start implementing some resilience projects with TDEC. And so I know TDEC is thinking more proactive about some of these things, and really starting to work with smaller towns like Dyersburg, Waverly, and Monterey. And so, Mayor, I really appreciate you taking the time to kind of peel back the curtain for us and let us know what's going on there in Monterey, and keep up the good work up there. I know the citizens up there are appreciating your attention to this issue. We're gonna shift now over to Roger Lindsay from Metro Water Services, and I believe he has brought Tony Plummer from Metro Water with him as well, and they are going to give a presentation about some of the mitigation and resilience projects they've undertaken in the Nashville-Davidson County area. And so I'll turn it over to them.
Okay, great. Thank you, Leslie. We appreciate the opportunity to participate in the coalition briefing today. Mayor Reels, I appreciate your comments. I was in the Seabees in the Navy myself, so there you go. We want to talk a little bit about some of the efforts that Metro Water has made toward mitigation. We experienced the big flood in May of 2010. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. This is a presentation that we had recently done for the Region 4 EPA. They had some interest in some of the work that we were doing. And so here we go. Okay. So does that fill the screen for everybody then?
Looks great. Thank you.
Okay. So the role that I play at Metro Water, I'm the program manager for floodplain and stormwater management, and Tony is our mitigation program manager. And Tony has 27 years experience in working with the likes of FEMA and private contractors, and she's been with Metro Water now for about 10 years, leading our buyout program which is a significant component of our mitigation in Nashville. When we talk about mitigation, we really have a broad-based kind of a mitigation program. We had set higher standards. We require new residential houses to be built 4 feet above the base flood elevation. We fairly rigidly enforce our substantial damage requirements. A house that's more than 50% damaged in a flood has to elevate to meet the floodplain standards. We've done a lot of work with our water and wastewater plants, elevating components that, for example, we had water damage at both plants, but the Harrington plant was totally out of operation for a month. So we've done a lot of work to upgrade the electrical systems, the chemical feed systems at those plants. Nashville SAFE. SAFE is an acronym for Situational Awareness in Flood Events. And it's a flood forecasting tool that we use every time the Emergency Operations Department gets activated for extreme weather events. So we really track and monitor those events. But what we want to really focus on today is our home buyout program, because that's really a point at which we really get a lot of bang for our buck. And so we started buying houses well before the 2010 flood. We had bought upwards of close to 100 houses over the decade or so before the 2010 flood. But since the 2010 flood, there's no holds barred. So as we talk about home buyouts, why home buyouts? You see a case on the screen here where these two houses are separated literally by a blue line stream. Today, the house on the right doesn't exist anymore. It was one of the candidates for buyout. That house had probably flooded a dozen times over the years. But it makes sense in a lot of cases to make these flood-prone houses go away, as opposed to trying to put a Band-Aid on them, elevate them perhaps, yet only to find out that they flood again. We're going to talk about funding sources. Tony is an expert on that. How we select homes for buyouts as opposed to elevating and those kinds of things. The issue of condemnation. We'll kind of briefly cover our accomplishments through this program, and then we'll talk just for a second about 7 Mile Creek, which was severely impacted by the flood that occurred just in March of this year. So why home buyouts? What are you going to do with a substantially damaged property? If it's more than 50% damaged, there's in some cases a house that was built well below or below the base flood elevation, the 100-year flood elevation, if you will, have to be dealt with. In some cases, the owner has the option of elevating those properties. In other cases, the owner throws up his hands and says, please buy me out. When we do buy out and demolish, it eliminates future flood damages and stops those owner losses. It reduces future losses for the National Flood Insurance Program. When we get those flood-prone houses out of the insurance program, that eliminates future claims. And believe me, we've seen some staggering examples of houses that seem to flood over and over again, and the flood insurance program ends up paying out far more dollars on the house over the long term than the house is really worth. When we do a buyout, the property owner gets fair market value, and he gets to move away from a high-risk area. It reduces the need for emergency response. We'll show you a slide or two about how dangerous that can be. And then it creates open space in the community, restores neighborhood areas to pristine creekside buffer zones with potential for installing parks or greenways, walkways. And our motto is that a demolished home will never flood again. Why is it important? This is a case of a house over in West Nashville. Again, we have that 4-foot freeboard requirement. The BFE is that middle arrow kind of pointing at the bottom third of the screen door on the front of the house. The base flood elevation in this case is 418 feet. The finished floor elevation is 2 feet lower than that at 416.4. The lowest adjacent grade is at 414. So you see that already the house is 6 feet short of meeting our floodplain requirements. And the water in this house in 2010 came all the way up to 421 feet. And then the base flood elevation plus 4, our compliance level is 422.7. So you can see that houses like this are much more suited toward being bought out and demolished rather than requiring an owner to elevate that house. This is an example of a compliant elevated house, probably from the same neighborhood. The owner took the option of elevating his house. He had the ability to take his increased cost of compliance money from his flood insurance policy to help offset some of the cost of elevating that house. But what do you have when you do that? Now it takes 12 steps to get to the front door of this house. It's not practical to do for an entire neighborhood. It's not practical for elderly residents that have issues with stairs. Your cars, you can park your cars under a house like this if you create a parking area, but the cars then are still well below flood elevations. And a house like this is probably a post-war house, a little 800 square foot house with 2 bedrooms, a bath, and a living and a kitchen area. They're just not worth the effort if you can make those houses go away. Tony's going to talk some about the funding sources.
Good afternoon, everyone. I kind of get into the weeds, so I'll have Roger kick me under the table whenever I start to do that. Metro typically uses 2 funding sources, but there's 4 listed on the screen. So let me start with the local funding. At times, we're lucky enough for the council to approve funding for us to acquire properties that we typically can't acquire through FEMA mitigation. The community development block grant we use after a disaster. It is for low-income homes, the cheaper homes, and it helps with that. It depends on what our Metro department would allow us to have. After May 2010, it was $1.5 million. So that kind of offset some of the costs that we had to put out. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, we just started with them probably about maybe 5 years ago. I'm thinking could be longer, but I think actually acquiring homes probably about 5 years ago. That is a 65-35 split. It's really not a whole lot different than the FEMA mitigation grants, other than that you have to have a survey and relocation assistance. That's two things that are required that FEMA does not require a local jurisdiction to do. FEMA mitigation, this is what I've been doing the whole 27 years I've been doing this. So there's 3 different types of funding sources under FEMA mitigation. You have your hazard mitigation grant program. It's a 75-25 split. Tennessee is lucky enough that, or the local jurisdictions are lucky enough that the state will front 50% of the non-Fed share match. So the state pays 12.5%. The local jurisdiction pays 12.5%. As y'all probably all know, is only allocated or obligated in the event of a presidentially declared disaster. We do utilize flood mitigation assistance. There are 2 different kinds of funding under flood mitigation assistance that we utilize, and that's the severe repetitive loss program, which is 100% paid by the feds, and that comes off of your severe repetitive loss list. The other one is the repetitive loss grant that we utilize. It's on the repetitive loss list. It has to have at least 2 flooding events within a 10-year period of time. And that is a 90-10 split with FEMA and the local government. On the FMA grants, there is no state match on that. BRIC, which is the Building Resilient Infrastructure and Community, took the place of PDM. That is allocated on, or it comes up on an annual basis, as does the flood mitigation assistance. Flood mitigation, the BRIC program is more for infrastructure projects. Along with FMA, they're both competitive across the U.S. We haven't gone after any of the BRIC because we're trying to get a better understanding because it's a newer program. Can you click it for me? My points of contact or our points of contact at the state would be Doug Warden, who is the state hazard mitigation manager. He's a cool guy to work with. The people that I depend on the most is Donna Holden, who is basically the closeout manager. She does the vast majority of the financials when you submit a reimbursement request. Carrie Cochran is super at mitigation application development, and she's a project specialist. So she walks all the local jurisdictions through how to develop an application. One thing that I want to say that I have found out in my years, mitigation, regardless of what program you go into, it's not, it appears to be complicated, but it's not. It's really very simple. If you're doing acquisition, you view it as no different than me buying your home from you. Other than you have to make sure that you have all the documentation to be able to be reimbursed at the end of the project or as you go along. So my suggestion would be, if any of y'all want to do, have done, and y'all work with Donna and Carrie, those are the two people that are the most knowledgeable about the programs. Key points to consider. Okay, so when you go to, and y'all may know, when you go to submit a mitigation application, there's two things that you have to have. You have to have a FEMA-approved hazard mitigation plan, and you have to be in good standing with the National Flood Insurance Program. Two things you got to have. The buyout program is strictly voluntary. We tell our property owners, or I tell our property owners, you have until you get to the closing table, you put the pen on the paper, and you can say, we don't want to participate, and that's fine. We walk away from the table, no harm, no foul. We're not going to take the property by eminent domain. It's against the federal regulations to do that. So getting back to the plan, I've got a little bit of experience in the plan. So in mitigation planning. So when you develop your plan, you want to make sure that you have the types of projects, whether they're acquisition, demolition projects, elevation projects, whether they're infrastructure projects. Make a wish list of what you want to do and put it in your plan. Make sure that it's in your plan, because if it's not in your plan, it's not going to get past TEMA. It's got to be in the plan. One thing that and I'm going to kind of go off subject here, which is really not about the mitigation plan in Waverly. I do get TEMA to call me every once in a while and ask my advice, which is really kind of cool for me. In Waverly, I think is it the county that didn't have the mitigation plan? So Donna and I were talking about it, about Waverly and the flooding event. And she said there's two counties in the area. The county where Waverly is at doesn't have a mitigation plan, or doesn't participate in the National Flood Insurance. Do you want to grow your YouTube? And I told her, I said, look, for 27 years, I know even back in May 2010, when there were jurisdictions that did not have a plan or were not participating in the National Flood Insurance Program, the jurisdictions need to reach out to the state. I know with Amy Miller, she'll work with local jurisdictions that are not in the National Flood Insurance Program to get them into the flood insurance program. Those local jurisdictions can reach out to the state and say, hey, okay, we've had this disaster. We want to submit an application, but we don't belong to one or the other or both. What can we do? What they need to do is ask, okay, let me start developing an application. And while I'm developing an application, I'll do my mitigation plan and or join the National Flood Insurance Program. And then that way they're still, their application would be on hold, but it would be with TEMA, if memory serves me correct, because we did this during 2010. And then when they have their mitigation plan and or their membership to the National Flood Insurance Program, their application goes through, and they don't miss the opportunity for funding for that disaster that happened, because it takes a year from the date of the disaster for the application period to close. So, okay, I'm off my soapbox.
Okay.
So with the Corps of Engineers, Metro had some input. I wasn't here when it started. Do what?
This report was done in 2014, so the feasibility study had been going on.
Okay, yeah. So with the Corps, Metro has some input. From my understanding, Metro has some input. Typically, the projects have some sort of hard infrastructure project, like a dam, something along that line. And so the Corps from what in my discussions with the people at the Corps and with Tom, is that they decided to do acquisition and demolition. They call it flood risk management. So we are acquiring properties under this project that deals with a dry dam or whatever it may be. I kind of stay out of that because that's not my area of expertise. One of the projects that we have, the infrastructure project fell through, so the Corps decided, well, we're just going to go ahead, and we were able to add some more properties to the project. So they did the feasibility study that you see there that was in 2014. They do all of the work. As far as, we don't do it, the local jurisdictions don't do an application or anything like that, which is like really cool. Once they approve the project, they let us know, and then we enter into a partnership agreement. We entered into a partnership agreement with the Corps. It is I think this is probably one of the grant programs that I work with that is trying, but you just have to, if you want to get reimbursed 65%, you just have to keep walking through it and knocking down any barriers that need to be. This project, or with the Corps funding, they want the ability to say that we can condemn the properties. Metro doesn't do that. It just doesn't make common sense. I mean, it's not common sense to me anyway, to condemn a property just because the property owner doesn't want to sell it to Metro. And I guess that's because of all my years of experience with FEMA, because you can't do it with that. The two things that I had mentioned is that was different is, well, there was two things. The relocation expenses, they require, they being the Corps, require that the property owners are given the relocation assistance. You can do it through FEMA mitigation grants. We don't with FEMA, but with this, you're required to do it. So we do it. If you're, I'm getting into the weeds, I'm going to stop.
Okay. Okay. So thank you, Tony. So there's a lot, the whole financing side of this thing is complex, and it may be an opportunity, Logan, as we go forward to provide additional information about where to gather information about the best approach for financing. Just to continue on, we talk about home selection. The golden rule applies in this case. He who has the gold makes the rules. And so Metro is fortunate that about 11 years ago, we passed a stormwater user fee. Right now, it's about $6 a month for each residential property in the city. But it produces a lot of money that we use in stormwater infrastructure type projects, but we also use it to cover our matches. So that's one of the ways that we don't just, fabricate money out of thin air. And then the city council, after watching this program progress along well for some period of time, began to make some additional dollars available in the case where a structure may not be subject to or eligible for some of the federal grant programs. On occasion, on short notice, we can just buy a house and demolish it and make it go away. We look at the history of flooding, politics. We just kind of enforce our regulations in accordance with the way they're written. So politics doesn't usually seem to have a big role in the process. There is more focus in the last year or so in looking at social vulnerability of owners. We want the most at-risk homes first. And especially like in our work with the Corps right now, we started with a list of 100 properties just in Mill Creek that we want to buy, but we're flexible as we've had houses that were damaged in the March event that weren't on that list. We've been able to do some adjusting on that list. Again, we talked about using your repetitive loss properties as a good place to start. If a house is flooded multiple times, This is a bizarre one here because you can see the date of losses across the bottom of the screen. There are 9 separate losses for this structure. So it clearly is a great candidate to make a house go away. And then we talk about the need. You've got to work through this process with FEMA. They've gotten real focused on Privacy Act requirements in the last year or so, and they're requiring that cities fill out this ISAA, Information Sharing and Access Agreement. We finalized ours and had it executed by the mayor and sent it to FEMA a year and a half ago. Cannot seem to get a final signature on it. So it makes it a little more challenging to get our regular repetitive loss list out of FEMA every year. So we talk about multiple floods. This was an example along Mill Creek. This is Wimpole Drive. There were 12 flood events over a 25-year period, and we began acquiring those houses. This was an area where we bought a lot of houses before the 2010 flood. The last 2 homes we purchased out of all the red boxes, they're all gone. There's a nice creekside buffer and natural area along that area that exists today. Because if there were still houses there, they would still flood today. So those are the kinds of areas we really like to focus on. Coming out of May 2010, with 2,000 people saying, please buy my house, we knew that we would be limited with 44 counties trying to access the HMGP money that was made available during the presidential disaster declaration. The things that we really started to focus on was we wanted residential properties. We wanted houses that were built prior to the existence of any flood maps. We wanted those houses that were in the floodway of those creeks and that were more than 50% damaged. And by limiting our focus on houses to acquire to those, we were able to whittle that list of 2,000 down to a level that was much more consistent with the kinds of dollars that we expected to get. And it still remains kind of the way we look at homes today, because those are the ones that are at highest risk. You look at an example like this. Is this house substantially damaged? There's the front door of the house. See how much water was in that house? The inside has been gutted to above the halfway level on the sheetrock and all the flooring. These are easy to tell here. This house floated off its foundation right into the middle of Hummingbird Drive. We call it the Hummingbird House. Ironic that the house flew off its foundation and ended up in the middle of the street. This was one of few where we really had houses washed off foundations, in contrast to what was experienced in Waverly with an event that blew so much water, a wall of water down Trace Creek in the heart of Waverly that demolished, swept hundreds of homes off of their foundation. So the magnitude and the nature of the storm often establishes what really constitutes. To condemn or not to condemn, you're not allowed to do that with a FEMA project. We have always maintained that if a homeowner wants to stay in his house, if he's substantially damaged, he's got to upgrade the house. But we're not going to force that homeowner to sell. On the other hand, you see my last bullet there. We coined the phrase subsequent victim. That's a person who today would be from California, who would buy a house sight unseen for a staggering number of dollars, only to find out 6 months later that the house is going to flood again. That's a subsequent victim. And we really are keen to try to avoid that from happening. We play kind of the hardcore game with some of these investors that blow into town after a flood, trying to scoop up houses for a quarter on the dollar just to flip them a month later for $100,000 over fair market value. So we talk about working with residents in areas. This is a parcel that's shaded in purple on Chadwell Drive, Gibson Drive. We've bought those other 8 lots over the last several years because they were all flood-prone lots. The owner of that last house won't sell to us, in spite of the fact that this news article was about that house. And you can see the fire rescue people coming in, bringing out a baby in a baby seat from that house. you can see the mailbox in the back there, the 817 mailbox. And when you look at the house today and you see that mailbox over on the right edge, if those guys had been coming out to the street carrying that baby on the other side of the mailbox, they would have not known that there was a significant ditch. That water, they could have gone underwater while trying to carry a baby out in a baby carrier. So this is a classic case where a buyout is necessary. Again, we're still dealing with a seller that's not real keen to sell, but he's going to flood again, and we'll make the same offer to him when we come back. This is just a quick shot of the 7 Mile Creek status. Again, the big event in March flooded several hundred houses along 7 Mile Creek. And you can see just from the red boxes around parcels, those are all parcels that we're having discussions with homeowners about buying to demolish, because again, those are flood-prone houses. They will flood again, and many of them are in the darker blue, the floodway of that creek. And that's just a dangerous place to try to lay your head on your pillow and go to sleep at night. So with that, we quickly summarize our accomplishments. We've spent over $60 million, 413 houses now removed from the floodplain. Again, houses that will never flood again. We've actually acquired 460 parcels. Our tax department in Metro always contacts us, and when they have a property going to a tax sale, and if it's in the floodplain and the floodway, they'll often just give that structure to us and let us make it go away. A lot of 70 out of 222 repetitive loss properties eliminated, and a lot of open space and greenway trails that are being built on this new land along creeks and rivers. So with that, we're always open for questions. Feel free to email me and Tony. And Logan, I assume you will provide contact information as follow-up to all this.
Yeah, absolutely. We will make sure to send that around. Thank you so much for that insight into all the great work you've been doing over the years in Nashville. And now we're going to shift gears and take even a bigger picture look at some of the other states around the Southeast that are working to support flood resilience and flood mitigation projects in their communities and in their states. And so I'm going to pass it over to Christiana Huber from the...
Welcome back to Career Assistance Program. So we hope you liked tonight's episode where we highlighted virtual internships as a mode in the next normal, as well as the conference coverage for the 12th Social Ethics Society Conference. So till next time, here at the Career Assistance Program, you can follow, like, and subscribe to our social media platforms on the Education Channel on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or YouTube. And we hope that you will join us every Tuesdays from 8 to 9 p.m. here at the Education Channel. So till next time, stay safe and healthy, everyone. Thank you. This has been your host, Attorney Amihan April M. Alcazar, and I'm looking forward to meeting you again very soon.